Greetings, science fiction and fantasy enthusiasts, and welcome to our podcast. With Ryan Sean O'Reilly, David Wilkinson, and Richard Mell. You're listening to No Deodorant in Outer Space. Now, let's get started.
How can I give up stalking when I have a family to feed? Get a job? I don't want to work for you. Your work makes me puke. Do you understand? This is the way I figure it. If a man works with you, he is always working for one of you. He is a slave and nothing else. And I always wanted to be myself, on my own, so that I could spit at you all, at your boredom and despair. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of No Deodorant in Outer Space. My name is Ryan Sean O'Reilly, and I'll be steering the ship as we take you on this wonderful voyage across the sea to Mother Russia. Joining me on this adventure is Arkady Mell and Boris Wilkinson. Gentlemen, how are you doing?
Howdy.
Rick? Dave?
Hi.
How are you doing today?
Oh, good. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. This episode, we are going to be covering the book Roadside Picnic, which came out in 1972 and was written by the brothers Arkady and Boris Strugatsky, and a film that was released in 1979 under the title Stalker, that was directed by Andrei Tarkovsky and starred Alexander Kananovsky. I don't think I'm pronouncing any of those names correctly, so if you guys know how to pronounce them better, please jump in. Why don't we get into the story? Let's go through our usual opening comments. I will go to you, David Wilkinson. Why don't you give us your opening comments to set up the show about this book and movie? And of course, we'll just do the book for this episode, and then the second half we'll do the movie.
You know, every year for the last couple of years, on May 17th, my friend Mark it's his birthday, and I always send him a picture of old balls. So I'm posting a picture of baseballs from the Hall of Fame on his Facebook page right now, and that has distracted me from what we're doing here.
As it would. Well, then, Rick, why don't we go to you for an opening comment while Dave posts his old balls picture.
It's posted. I can tag you guys in it, too. Oh. Rick, are you still on Facebook?
No, I left Facebook.
That's a sore subject.
It's not sore. I just left. I don't care.
Well, no, I don't know if you left it. I don't know if you just blocked people or if you left it completely.
I don't want to pay attention to it anymore. It's like a waste of my time.
So, okay, Will, give us your own opening comments about this book and movie.
Okay. It's Russian. It's definitely a book that I read. And, I don't know. Why don't you give me your opening comments and I'll play off those.
I thought this book was fairly unique, given all the uniqueness that we've experienced so far doing this podcast. I think that this one kind of stands out. First of all, it's Russian translation, and I'm sure in the Russian language there are certain ways to describe pretty much everything. And the translation, I think, follows.
Okay, that's a great opening comment.
Okay,
look, let's go to you.
Thanks, Ryan.
It's
just a quick comment. Just a quick comment.
It's a trippy journey into the ether of reality and science fiction mixed with a translation from the original Russian text. I wanted to keep reading, and when it ended, I was sad that the story was over.
Great, and I will add a moody morass railing against the gray walls of reality in perfect tone.
Rick was saying earlier, which you may or may not edit out, I kept struggling with this book, not in a bad way, but I kept wondering if I was missing something because it was translated from a different language. And then I reading up on it, I think it was kind of a trippy, in the ether kind of book. I liked it, but I wish I spoke Russian, I guess, so I could read the original text.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Russians, this was written by two brothers,
allegedly,
Arkady and Boris.
Maybe.
Why don't you give us a little background and bio on them?
Yeah.
So we can get into them.
The writers took the time to introduce you to each of the characters that made the book, and you got to know their interpersonal thoughts, and it was quite funny, with...
I'm not buying it. I'm not buying that two people wrote this book. I don't buy it. I think there's one brother and one hanger-oner. I don't know who it is, but, how do you write a book with two people?
There are authors do pair up and write books.
Mm-hmm. How?
Sometimes they flip chapters, sometimes they write certain parts. I don't know. It's all different. So, but yeah, that's a good question. I think they wrote a number of books together while they were both alive, and then after Arkady died, who died, first, I think Boris only released a couple of books after that.
Yeah, so maybe Arkady was the writer. Boris was the hanger on her. I don't know. I don't get how two people can write books. It wasn't really explained to me in my research.
Yeah, I didn't see anything about that either. But they did write together. I mean,
how do we know that?
And all their
really?
stuff.
Maybe.
Well, I mean, no one distinguishes it. And I don't think they did a lot separately. Either one of them.
It seemed like it took a lot to get it published, in Mother Russia at that point, in the Soviet Union. You not only needed the tenacity to write a, complete story that was, marketable, but you also had to kind of push it through the red tape. I can see why it would be like a 2-person operation.
Well, that's more like
I can't. Plus, there's thousands of Russian authors that did just fine without having to do a team system. So
okay, well, nonetheless, what do you know about the brothers besides that they were teamed up on this?
Now they're dead, and
that's like a frequent comment from you.
Well, yeah, that's why they're not here. They can't really defend themselves. So we're free to say whatever we want. They're Russian. They were born about 8 years apart. Because they're Russian, their life was terrible, and their dad's was like I don't know, was some other Russian guy. I think he was I forget. He was like a seamstress or a tailor or something horrible. Their mom was a school teacher or something equally unremarkable.
Didn't their dad die on a train ride?
I don't know. Who the fuck knows? I mean, I was more interested in their actual work than their life because, again, they're Russian. They grew up in Russia during the height of the failed state communism experiment that went horribly south and murdered, almost 1 billion people. But oddly enough, yeah, a lot of their books were very subversive, very anti-communism, and they had to, kind of put stuff in the subtext. This book took 8 years to get published, as Rick May commented on, and a lot of their works weren't even published in Russian. Some of them were published posthumously. But oddly enough, they are loved and revered in Russia and around the world, but they're national heroes in Russia. In fact, the elder Boris was very prominent during the last few years of his life, defending people like Pussy Riot and speaking out against the state. And what's weird is even Putin himself commemorated his death when he passed in 2012 and spoke to him as a great statesman and a great national figure. They kind of remind me of, I'm going to mangle his name, Carl Sagan, whatever the fuck his name is.
Carl Sagan, yeah.
Yeah, in America, where he's a very loved, revered American author. And I kind of get the impression these guys were the Carl Sagan types of Russia. And they're very prolific. Reading the summaries of some of their work, there was another very popular book they called, not the Gods Must Be Crazy, but It's Hard to Be a God. That was
yeah.
Which was a very popular book, which kind of depicted a traveler going to an alien world that was very similar to the communist state and being aghast at how people sacrificed their freedom. But again, they spoke a lot in their subtleties in their critique of the government and the failed state they lived in their whole lives. But again, I mean, the one thing that I've read, Roadside Picnic, really spoke to me. I thought it was a very interesting book, both some of its parts were interesting, and the individual components were well written and well thought out. And I kind of they were big into world building, which they had a whole series of books that took place in like an ideal state, I think called the Noon, which they told their publishers was like an ideal communist state, but it was actually a way to, I mean, maybe it was where everybody, had a job that they loved and was happy and, that sort of thing. But they really did create a whole sci-fi world. And I like to immerse myself more in that, based on this book, which was outside of that world. I think it was outside of this. I think this book was a standalone type thing. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. Again, I mean, I don't think it was in the Noon universe. I think you're right. Yeah, but it's just, we're so used to our little comfortable world of British and American authors where the culture and the language comes so easy. It's hard to throw ourselves into a whole different culture and language and pick up on it. So I kind of feel like I am a traveler right now at a roadside picnic myself as I go through here, trying to decipher what's fiction, what's not fiction, what's meant to be confusing, what maybe I'm confused by. And no, it's definitely a good read and really captured my imagination, to be honest.
Yeah, the descriptions of some of their other books were very intriguing. It does make me want to check out other ones. I saw there was another one about a time traveler. I forget what the name of it was. I wish I could remember. Where the time traveler goes back into like a medieval type world, and he's faced with this dilemma of overthrowing this oppressive sort of like despot dictator who's hurting those people, or just letting things run their course, which I think is a common theme in a lot of their works, is people faced with these tough situations where there isn't a clear like choice or resolution. It's like, if we kill the despot, then there'll be even more chaos and stuff. And the time traveler has access to all this technology and stuff.
It's despot.
Okay. So, I mean, it's even the descriptions of their work seemed really interesting and intriguing to me. I also felt like I wanted to check out more of this stuff, and I got the same impression that you got, Wilk, that they're very, very well respected, and even in Russia holds them out in high regard, like you said.
Yeah. So, but again, I had never heard of these guys until we picked this book, and I'm glad we did. But
yeah,
you know, I mean, I'd love to see what kind of formed these thought patterns in their mind, and I mean, it's pretty unique, you know.
Yeah, I also saw some writings about them saying that their early stuff was more utopian, and then they became more dystopian as things went on. So they lived through a lot. When were these guys born? In the 30s? Was Arkady born in the 30s? And like I said, I think he was with his dad on a train in some town or something that was bombed, and everyone died on the whole train except for Arkady, including his father. And then they were alive for perestroika. Is that the right pronunciation of that? When the Soviet Union started opening up and stuff like that. So these guys saw a lot and experienced a lot, and it does seem like it kind of just, leached into their work, and they just picked up what was going on around them and just created these very intriguing works of fiction and science fiction. And they seem to, they're known for going into science fiction, but it's not necessarily like hard sci-fi. It reminds me of like Kurt Vonnegut, it's like bringing in science fiction elements, but just kind of more dabbling in it. So I don't know. It's very, very intriguing. Rick, did you have anything to add about these guys?
Ditto, guys. It was a compelling read. I like the multiple perspectives up and down, like the socioeconomic ladder. And it wasn't necessarily like a communist setting, even though...
Are you talking about the book, or are you talking about the authors?
Well, Wilk had made the comment that they write anti-communist
they do
stories and stuff. I don't think this one was particularly anti-communist. This was...
Well, I didn't say it was.
I don't think it was along those lines.
Yeah, I didn't either.
Yeah, but all right. Well, yeah. I mean, if you guys have nothing else to add on the actual authors, then we can actually just jump into the book.
Well, to Rick's point, I mean, this book did take 8 years to get published, though, because the publishers were in the Soviet Union. They weren't sure if it was pro or anti-communism, so they kind of sat in it for a while too. So whether it was or wasn't,
it was a bit nebulous.
They were known for, there's a lot of talk about them, about the fact that they were able to get away with a lot more in their book than other authors because it was science fiction and set in a fantasy world. But I also felt the same way. I didn't know if there was any overt allegories in this.
Yeah, I mean, and really,
I don't think so.
Yeah, well.
I mean, in the afterword, one of the authors writes...
Why don't you think so, though? I mean, this is like written in 1970 about a country that we've never lived in or spent time in by two people.
Well, get into the afterword, Rick, because I read that too. That was by Boris himself.
Yeah, Boris wrote it, and he said fairly clearly that the differences that the bureaucracy had with the story wasn't necessarily ideological. It was more they were picking out like points of excessive violence and language. And their reasoning was, this is a science fiction book, and we don't want our young communists to be influenced with, alcohol abuse and, stuff like that. Fairly reasonable things, except I think the alcoholism...
I don't know if they were reasonable, but they were certainly not political as political as you would think.
No, they're not as political as you would think.
He even breaks it down in that he actually shows some of the comments from the editor,
right? The
actual lines.
They're fairly subtle, but they all kind of point at I think an overall negative tone in the book. They obviously didn't like it, but that's something I found unique in the book. Was it got pretty real. It goes into some of the innermost thoughts of these characters, and they're not always pleasant. And a lot of the characters, I mean, they're constantly drinking alcohol, drinking beer, smoking cigarettes. They're not taking care of themselves. And I mean, these are heroes in the story. So, you can reasonably see the concerns of the Soviet bureaucracy looking at this thing.
Well, you say reasonably. I mean, they're not overtly political. They're not they don't seem to be political concerns as they do seem to be like morality concerns.
Yeah, morality concerns.
That kind of stuff goes on here as well, I guess. Really.
Right.
As we've seen in some of the other.
I mean,
all right. Well,
when your job is to control all media, you need to control all media, especially when there's some product here that is meant for a younger audience. You're going to control that product, and you're going to try and censor the shit out of it.
And they were working at a time, I think, when there was only like one authorized science fiction publisher, right? In like the whole country. I think I got that impression. There was just like one publishing house that would do all the sci-fi stuff.
That was the impression I got too. It was kind of,
everything was on lockdown.
Everything's a monopoly though. I mean, there's not like multiple publishing houses in competition with each other.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, well, why don't we get into the book? And Rick, why don't you give us a synopsis of the book as best you can, and set us up here with Roadside Picnic.
So, Roadside Picnic is based in an unknown part of the world, but
isn't it set in Canada?
Yeah, that wasn't clear to me. I don't think it was Canada, but they're clearly part of the planet Earth, and we're dealing with real human beings. And a town pretty much got enveloped by an alien visit, and no one really noticed the aliens, but they left a bunch of their trash behind them. And in this area, which they call the zone, there's strange occurrences of force fields and gravity concentrations and, things that are extremely dangerous to people. So they have blocked this thing off with the awareness that this area just has a ton of treasures that will, push the bounds of science as we know it. But
it's dangerous too.
It's extremely dangerous. And the Institute, which is like the scientific, organization that is overseeing the goings on in the zone, they're developing robots. But at the same time, the profession of retrieving alien objects from the zone has been done by stalkers. And the main character, one of the main characters, Redrick, what's his last name? I forget.
Schuhart? Is it Schuhart?
Schuhart, yeah.
Schuhart. And a stalker is just a person, just like a non-authorized person going in there.
Correct. But then, they'll occasionally find jobs with the Institute because the Institute needs these people. So they're constantly being used for the sole purpose of benefiting the Institute, but they have side jobs, and it's a complicated lifestyle because it's extremely difficult, and you're really just kind of doing it for your own ends and means. So the main character, he goes through this tension, and he's dealing with an agent, not only for the Institute, but this agent,
Richard Noonan?
Yeah,
Richard Noonan.
Richard Noonan. He's also dealing with the military, and he's like a stable master for the military. He's overseeing all of the stalkers who go into this zone. And it's just his dealings with the upper echelons of the bureaucracy. And the bureaucracy is not necessarily described as a communist bureaucracy. They mention the UN quite a bit when they're talking about, the military objectives. So it's more like an international conglomerate that is overseeing this zone. And it's the politics from the lowly stalker up to the highest general, basically. And it's kind of like a philosophical question. What do we do with this quote unquote gift that the aliens have left us?
Yeah. And the story centers primarily around Red. And, the interesting thing about this story is that the aliens are gone, right? You don't see the aliens are not there. The whole visit from the aliens happened previously. You never see aliens in this. All you know is the aliens were there and they're gone. And I don't think anyone's ever seen them. They don't really know what exactly happened. There's the supposition that the aliens came there and they had almost like a picnic and they just left some junk behind that they didn't want. And there's it's like there's no purpose to it. It's
but that's like the most accessible theory to it. There's other theories that are passed around in the book. No one really knows anything.
Yeah, but that's kind of like the interesting point about the book is that it's not like the prelude to an alien invasion. That's totally off the table. That's what's one of the most unique things about this book is there's just all this technology there and no one knows why it's there, and some of it's good and some of it's bad and some of it's neutral, and they just kind of have to deal with it. And I found that very refreshing, myself. I don't know, how did you feel about it, Will? About the whole alien aspect, the sci-fi aspect.
I mean, like you said, there really wasn't an alien persona. It was just alien artifacts. The phrase roadside picnic implies that we're an afterthought. They stopped here on the way to somewhere else, and this was their litter. This was their candy wrappers and their pieces of blanket and waste they left as they sat and had a picnic and then left. The way that, if you or I had a roadside picnic, it might scare the grasshoppers or ants.
Imagine
leave behind stuff.
Being an ant crawling around and finding a Dorito and starting to eat it and then having to deal with, digestive issues after that.
But I mean, for that to be the premise of a book, that's pretty... I feel like that was more unique, right? It's a lot easier just to say, okay, well, the aliens are going to leave behind the junk, and then this is going to be the Pandora's box that's going to change everything. And that doesn't happen in this story, right? You do get the implication that this technology is changing everything, but it's not unleashing the doomsday clock, And And I just found that really refreshing. And it kind of gets into matters of like faith and stuff. It's just like there's certain things in the world that you just have to deal with, and they're there. And how are you going to respond? How are you going to live your life? You know?
Well, I mean, there's not really any religious aspect. It's almost like the question of the meaning of life and, why are we all here? And were they trying to make contact with us? And why did they decide not to get any feedback from us? And are we that savage that, they didn't wait up for us, that kind of thing. There are all kinds of questions. And
then there's the fact that you got to go forward because there's no answers. But you still have to go forward and live life. And there's this stuff here. And how are we going to live life even though we don't know what the heck just happened?
Right. But it gets down to the nitty gritty of the stalker, and it goes all the way up to, like the masters of the program on Earth, which is extremely refreshing to me.
The masters of the program, go into, what do you mean about that?
The interview that Dick Noonan had with his supervisor, in the military branch, just regarding all of the various stalkers, where they were at, in their life, if they were intending on going back into the zone or not. So clearly, Dick Noonan is a double agent, and he's got such a great relationship with Redrick that Redrick completely trusts him and speaks nothing but the complete truth with him. And at the same time, Dick Noonan is watching him for his master. And at the same time, Dick's got all kinds of seedy businesses. I mean, he's kind of like a pimp. He's got all kinds of things on the side. And I'm sure there's a lot of gaff every time a big, package of swag from the zone comes in. And
there's a real underworld vibe to this whole thing. Everyone's got nicknames.
Yeah.
And everyone's kind of working a deal, the whole time.
Right.
The Vulture. Wilk, what about the Vulture? I mean, what do you think about that character? He's probably, aside from Red, he probably comes into this the most, right? I don't know who else comes in more than the Vulture.
Yes. I mean,
Go ahead.
With what?
Well, what do you think about the character of the Vulture? What's his angle? What does he really care about? Is he really just out for himself? And, why does Red keep dealing with him? Even though he doesn't want to.
Well, I mean, the Vulture's there. He has to deal with him. There's not a lot to deal with. And not many people are going inside these zones, and he's part of that little world. I didn't find honestly, I didn't really care about the characters that much in the story. I mean, not that they were badly written, but I was kind of more interested in the actual world itself. So, the Vulture was there. His legs didn't really make it through the story. I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, the world was developed through the lenses of, 3-4 different characters in the story, though. I mean,
yeah.
The world was introduced through their eyes, and that makes these characters interesting, I think. So it's worth talking about the Vulture, at least in some capacity.
Yeah.
I mean, he's kind of like the old codger, basically the most experienced stalker,
but he's also got a bad rep. That's why he's called the Vulture. Isn't he known for bringing younger people in there and then just using them? Because, let's talk about the zone. The zone is full of traps, essentially. It's like areas that have screwed up gravitation or various different things that can just kill you. And I thought the Vulture has a reputation for bringing, like, inexperienced people in there and letting them, like, find traps for him.
Right.
And then, so everyone doesn't like him because of that.
Yeah, using people as keys to get into the places that they need to within the zone, yeah. They know exactly where the trap is when someone walks right into it. So there's all kinds of stories, gossip going on around that. And that's almost like that's how the Vulture gets his nickname. I mean, he's kind of a user of other people who are interested in checking this place out.
Why doesn't Red cut off relations with them? Like, at some point, Red actually goes to jail and then he comes back.
Oh, the Vulture, he promises Red the exact location of the Golden Sphere, which is this, It's this mythic object within the zone that grants wishes.
Right.
And they go into a lot with what these wishes are. And it's kind of a microcosm of, the meaning of life. What is your true wish? It's not anything that you would just write up and tell somebody. It's a very personal thing. And we don't really learn the wishes of anybody. It's like your most deepest subconscious, desire. And I don't know if anyone really knows. It's, we all want influence and power and freedom and all of that. But what exactly is that and how is that defined? And everyone's got their own version of it,
Mm-hmm. So the Vulture is the one who knows where supposedly knows where the Golden Sphere is. And it turns out, I guess he does. And then he's also got a son and daughter. His daughter, who's like very attractive and just sort of, vapid and doesn't really care about him. And then the son is one who accompanies Red at the end, right?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah. And then, we'll get into the end a little bit after that, or a little bit later. I found the whole sci-fi elements that are very underplayed in this book, but they were all fascinating. All the traps and the way that Red would try to discover the traps and the whole zone area. Like, he goes around and just like throws like nuts and bolts and just tries to see if they act a little differently when he throws them, if they get pulled or veered to the side. It got me very fascinated with the story very quickly.
Not me so much. I mean,
no,
all of those, I just think they're gimmicks. I mean, they're not exactly gimmicks. They're just there to explain to you what's going on in this zone. I mean, to write the story and just sort of,
well, let me see. Let's go to Will. Will, what is the zone? I mean, the zone, I know the zone is supposed to be, like, there's supposed to be, like, 6 zones on the planet where the aliens came and left stuff behind. But is there something more to it? Does it represent something?
No.
Why not?
Why not what? No.
Why doesn't it represent it?
It's not a metaphor. It's a literal, it's alien litter.
It's just alien litter?
Yeah.
But do you think that there's something, I mean, why does Red keep going back to the zone? Even like when he gets a government job and he's like legitimized himself and
well,
you know.
Because I think it's inherent in our nature to try and understand things that we don't, to explore mystery until we get an answer. Why do women date guys that are gay? They want them to admit that they're gay. Return them. Why do we climb mountains to see what's on top? Why do we go into space? Why do we dive into the ocean? I mean, until the zone is understood and, categorized, and you can read about it in Wikipedia or open up a Ranger Rick and see pictures of the innermost parts of the zone, then it's out there and it's calling to you. And who can...
The Golden Sphere issue of Ranger Rick?
Yeah, who can resist that call? But ultimately... we're just going through someone else's trash. That's the fun part about this book. It has no meaning. It's discarded.
And yet it affects everything.
No,
people
it doesn't affect everything. It affects the people around it.
People going into the zone, even the people who were part of the zone and then go move other places, they even affect people around them.
I think you're misunderstanding. Or not misunderstanding. I think my interpretation is different than yours. And no, I think the zones affect very little. I think the fact that there are zones shows how little effect they have on anything. Again, it shows that this is an afterthought, that life itself on Earth is very insignificant compared to the vast universe, that we don't know what's out there, and to say that it affects everything, no, it affects very little. It affects...
Oh, well, on the planet, they get new technology from the zone?
But the planet is a very little sphere in a much larger universe. To say it affects everything...
Yeah, true.
...is a very myopic statement. And again, it's like an ant who sees a piece of sugar, that affects everything too, but it really doesn't. It's a piece of sugar in a field on a planet spinning through space. So, no, I thought it was just kind of an interesting take on things, too. Now, there's no, these guys are agnostic, atheists, life, nihilists. There's no hidden meaning here. It's really just saying life isn't as important as we think it is. That's my take.
It's heavy, though. I know you say like there's no meaning there, but I feel like there is meaning, and there's meaning in the questions.
But there's conversations between Redrick and Dick Noonan about just that. They talk about how we get all this stuff from the aliens as a gift. We can see it as a gift. We can see it as a curse. It doesn't really matter. What's going on right now is that it's just everyone is being oversensitive about it. They acknowledge the fact that it's a treasure trove, and right at that point, from that perspective, it's a magnet for all kinds of underground commerce and military involvement. But the thing is, no one really knows what the outcome is going to be, and they're all kind of working in and around the lip of this volcano here that could produce something that could change the world. It just is what it is. That's kind of
it's symbolic of a lot of things. It
is symbolic, and it could stand as a metaphor for a lot of things. But
maybe it is a metaphor, and it's not necessarily an allegory. It's not necessarily an allegory for communism or anything else. I even think like it's almost like religion. Like religion can do a lot of good for people, and it can do a lot of bad for people. It's just like this alien junk. It's doing good and bad.
The religious people in this story are depicted as people who perceive the zone as inherently evil. And all they want to do is just blow the shit out of it, and they want to.
But the presence of the zone the presence of the zone is like religion in itself. Like there's a good aspect and a bad aspect.
It's just science. You know, they're just trying to, all of this stuff is filtering out of the zone for the sake of science ultimately. And science is just getting a better understanding of what's going on.
I feel like Red's on you feel like Red's on a spiritual quest in a way?
No.
Possibly altruistic, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think Ryan, you're reading a lot into this, and that's your, as a reader, you're right to do that. But I feel like, again, I got into in this in the last book that we read. I feel like you're putting what you want, you're imprinting what you want to see here, that it's not necessarily there. And I mean, you got to look at it more objectively speaking. This isn't an allegory to religion.
I don't know that it's an allegory to religion. I'm not saying it. I think it's more metaphorical. I think it can be a lot of things. It's amorphous.
But it's not. It's not a metaphor for religion or an allegory
to
religion.
It's metaphorical to a lot of things. It's metaphorical to life.
If it's metaphorical to a lot of things, then it's metaphorical to nothing. I mean, a metaphor is a very specific thing that an author.
No, you're talking about allegory. That's allegory.
I'm not. I'm talking about a metaphor. Both can be said about. You can't use a metaphor for multiple things. If you're trying to use something as a metaphor, then you're trying to use it as a metaphor for that particular thing. If it can be a metaphor for a lot of things, then it's a metaphor for nothing. What they did here is they told a story about litter and the effect it had on people around here. And if anything, it's about the arrogance of man that we think. I mean, like, two examples here. Have you ever seen the movie The Gods Must Be Crazy, made in the early 80s, where a Coke bottle is dropped out of an airplane by two British pilots, and the Coke bottle, the glass Coke bottle, falls into a village of people that have never seen any Western goods, and they worship the Coke bottle. It becomes a holy, sacred object passed down from generation to generation in that tribe, and they think it's a divine providence. They use it as a tool. It's a gift from the gods, and it's a goddamn Coke bottle. And I mean, that's what we have here. And again,
right, that's the metaphor. It's like
it's not a metaphor.
It's like religion.
It's not okay. It's not religion.
I'm not saying that this is necessarily only religion, but I'm just saying that's what makes this have depth.
Yeah, but we're not like freshmen in college or seniors in high school where we're trying to compare everything to religion or Jesus here. I mean, like, I think
I'm not saying it is a direct comparison to religion. I'm just saying it makes me think of that. It also makes me think of how it's this very existential. Like, what is our place in the world, and dealing with just the chaos of life. You know,
I guess
but the trash is not a metaphor.
I'm not saying it's limited to. I'm not saying it's limited.
It's how all these humans react to it. That's the story, and that's not a metaphor. It's just basically a realistic reaction to a bunch of alien trash. I mean, it's realistic.
I agree with Rick for once, not for once, but I do.
Yeah.
No, I think it's a literal story. I think it's interesting because it literally happens and people are reacting to this chaotic disturbance that, was made without any thought or afterthought by the people that left it behind.
What about the scene, at some point they talk about essentially zombies coming out of the zone. The dead start rising again and going back to where they were from. And the government steps in and removes these people. However, Red, being who he is, his father comes back and he keeps his father living there in his house. And we know it's said in the book that people who are stalkers, their offspring will be affected. And Red has a child who does seem to be affected in some ways from his exposure to the zone. And there's this creepy scene where Red and his wife wake up, I think, in the middle of the night, and his daughter, who is affected by the zone genetically, and then his father, who has been literally resurrected from the zone, like sort of scream or yell in the middle of the night, some kind of like similar tone back and forth. And like, that's kind of all that comes out of that scene. But man, that scene really hit me. It was just kind of very eerie. I really liked that scene. I don't know if that stuck out to you guys or not.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It kind of raised the hair on the back of my head.
Yeah. Showing how I mean, there is allusions to maybe like how is the zone going to affect the world? Somebody speculates that maybe the zone was meant to change people, for the aliens, but no one really knows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like all the lowbrow humor too. I don't have any anecdotes, but there's
lots of drinking. There's constant drinking.
Yeah, but that makes it interesting. Peppers it a bit.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a serious subject. You need a bit of relief there. And it provides.
Mm-hmm. What about the ending?
It's very Vonnegut.
How so?
Yeah, someone's screaming. A phrase reminds me of the end of
fair enough.
Breakfast of Champions had a very similar ending. But yeah, no, it's I mean, in the end, Red basically murders a child to get this golden sphere.
Wait, why does he murder the child? I thought the guy ran out on his own, didn't he?
Well, I mean, if I tell you to run ahead and I know that someone's going to stab you in the throat, I mean, that kind of makes me complicit in your death. So, I mean...
He went on his own, though. he became just completely uncontrollable.
That's the impression I got.
Yeah, that's what I got too. The kid was just overcome with all of the excitement. He thought he had the golden sphere right there in the palm of his hand, and he thought he was getting his wish granted. And maybe he did, but the story ended pretty abruptly, so we don't really know. I mean, just given the whole tone of the book, I doubt it.
I mean, the ending is that kid gets ripped apart, right, by a trap, by some kind of alien trap.
Grind.
And then
they call it meat grinder.
Yeah, meat grinder. But then it ends with Red also going into that same trap, even though he just experienced it. So, I mean, is he wishing for death, or does he believe that something actually different will happen to him? It's kind of a crazy ending.
Yeah, it's kind of a crazy book, to be honest.
It is.
I mean, it's good reading, but I mean, it's not really the most. It's not like The White Worm. I mean, but it's like the end.
It's not The White Worm.
It's organized. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, no. I mean, I don't want to call it incoherent, because it's not incoherent, but it's definitely abstract, I'd say, at the end. I mean, like, yeah, I don't know what to make of that ending, to be honest. I mean, I did get the impression he wanted the kid to go into the grinder so he could get to the sphere, though. That's
not the impression I got.
No.
I got the impression that Rick is saying that the kid just got overcome in the jubilance of seeing the spear and just like ran out there. And then I guess Red sort of also was just fed up with everything. And he's like, I thought he felt guilty because he watched what happened to the kid. I thought Rick. I thought Red was just, I'm playing my last card. I read the last chapter here. I'm playing my last card, and here it is. You know what? Do or die. This is it. I'm putting all my my money on Red, and this is it. I'm going in. Yes. I don't know. Well, Rick, what did you think? Similarly or different?
Both. At first, when Red was on this trip with the Vulture's son, he completely despised him. And the kid was just saying things that he should never have said in the zone, just complaining about, his freaking pants not being on straight, or just a lot of sort of petty complaining. And Red wouldn't have it. And there was an instance where the both of them got into trouble, and Red found himself actually moving very intentionally to save this kid from like this heat wave that comes over them. And he risks his own life to save this kid. And then he's like, oh my God,
about that, yeah.
I'm amazed that I actually, am treating this kid like he's my own son.
Yeah, it was like his instinct just kicked in.
And before the kid runs off and becomes uncontrollable, they have like a moment of reckoning. And the kid he describes, or he doesn't describe, he demonstrates his humble perspective on things. And what he wishes for is, something very lovely and something that would invest you emotionally into this kid. And then he just kind of gets torn in half. And I don't think it had anything to do with Red,
Well, is it that, because at first the kid says he wants to get his legs back for his dad. And then Red is like, he doesn't believe him.
Oh, yeah. He called I don't know if that was bullshit, but that's what Red thought,
Okay, guys, here we go. Toward the last page. He was cool and calm. He knew what was about to happen, and he knew that he would not watch, but it was still all right to watch. And he did, feeling nothing in particular, except that deep inside a little worm started wiggling around, twisting its sharp head in his gut. He knew what was, guys. I mean, I basically think he felt guilty about it after he watched the kid die, and
yeah, of course.
Well, of course he felt guilty, but I still felt like it's the zone. He just figured something bad was going to happen just because it was the zone.
I mean, he did everything he could do. The kid was just uncontrollable at that point.
I don't think he wasn't acting like the Vulture. He wasn't using the kid to try to get to the sphere. Although, did he make some comments previous to that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he was extremely spiteful of the kid being the Vulture's son and how he was supposed to look after this kid and how he was a complete liability. But Redrick is more human than almost everyone else in this book, except for maybe to his wife. I think he's a bit aggressive to his wife, a little chauvinistic, but I think the guy is a complete real depiction of someone who may be in that position.
Well, why don't we wrap it up here? Let's just give our final comments and star ratings. Let me go to you, Wilk. How many stars are you going to give this? And if any, you have any final comments?
Three stars, and Red killed the kid.
Okay. Rick, let's go to you. How many stars and any final comments?
I'll give this book 4 stars, 4.5 stars. Very good.
Okay. I'm going to give this book 5 stars. It really, maybe especially after coming off the last book, I really, really liked this, and I was really into it, and I did feel like it was opened up like a whole new world to me. And it's strange, and it's interesting, and it's subtle, and I think there's a lot more depth in it. And I read it, kind of fast. and I feel like there's more there for me to discover. It was really just really excellent. It's worth a read, and it's just awesome. So with that, I'll invite everyone to, join us on our next episode when we cover the movie Stalker, directed by Andrei Tarkovsky, in our second half of our episode. And also in the meantime, you can visit our website, nodeodorant.com. Follow us on Twitter. You can go to our Facebook page, like that. You can find our YouTube, our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Google Music, YouTube, just anywhere you can get podcasts, you can find our podcast. We invite anyone to subscribe, write reviews, rate our podcast. We appreciate all efforts to that end. And until then, we will say a heartfelt goodbye. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye, everyone.
See you in hell.
For more information on the topics discussed in this episode, or to read our show notes and find us on social media, visit nodeodorant.com. For more information on Ryan Sean O'Reilly and his various works of fiction, visit ryanseano'reilly.com. For more information on David Wilkinson, visit drycracker.com. For more information on Richard Mell, check out his profile at goodreads.com. The theme music for this podcast was written by John Doyle from the band I Decline. You can visit him at i-decline.com. Voiceover for this podcast was provided by me, Margaret O'Reilly. Well, that concludes our episode. We hope you've learned a lot. Again, thanks for listening to our show. And always, always remember, there is no deodorant in outer space.
And
I'm not buying it. I'm not buying that two people wrote this
to
book.
know their interpersonal thoughts.
I don't buy it. I think there's one brother and
quite
one
funny.
around her.
You know,
I don't know who it is, but I mean, how do you write a book with two people?
Who's someone talking right now? Hello.
There are other.
Should we turn video off?
Authors do pair up and write books.
Mm-hmm. How?
They break.
You guys
sometimes
copy me?
they flip chapters. Sometimes they write certain parts. I don't know.
You guys hear me?
Now we can. What's going on, Rick?
Oh, you guys are chopping out. I'm gonna turn video off.
Let's turn video off. All right, I got video off.
So, what do we do with this quote unquote gift that the aliens have left us?
Yeah. And the story centers primarily around Red and you know, the interesting thing about this story is that the aliens are gone, right? You don't see the aliens are not there. The whole visit from the aliens happened previously. Is someone typing in the background? It's totally getting picked up.
Wilk, did I make you mad again?
No.
Are you banging around over there?
Nope.
Okay. You're getting pretty loud over there, Wilk. Doesn't sound like you're engaged.
Yeah. Are you okay, Wilk?
Yeah.
What's wrong?
Nothing. Are we going to do this or?
We're doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, we're doing it.
I tried to give my best synopsis, Wilk.
Yeah, you're fine. You're good.
All right.
Is someone tapping something or just like dropping something over and over again? Yeah, that noise. Is that Wilk? Can you stop that?
What?
I don't know. Someone's like making noise. Like, yeah, that too.
Okay.